I meet a lot of people. I'm popular.
Oh, go, whatever. No.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. What a day. What an episode. Good to be here. Nice to see you, Will.
Yes.
That's when you say something back.
Oh, yes. Hello. What episode number is this?
Well, let's first say hello to Bill. So last week we had Will and Will, annoying. This week we have Will and Bill, slightly less annoying, but still annoying. It is episode 15, and it looks like you read my notes from Remarkable. Remarkable, the single-use device that should sponsor our podcast. Welcome.
So we're moving on from sparkling beverages, and now you're going after
I'm
technology.
going after whoever might be with us. Hey, why is Bill closer to you? I don't think that's right. Thank you. Well, now you're don't stand too close to me. So 15th episode.
Yes.
Will, when you were thinking
Yes.
about this endeavor, be honest, how many episodes did you think we'd ever come up with?
6.
Nice. Good number.
Yeah.
Bill, when you first saw this, how many episodes did you think we'd ever get to?
He's like, why'd they make one?
Right. I only watched 2. I have to be very honest with you. I've watched 2 of them to get an idea of what I was getting into.
And what did you think? You showed up.
I did. Yep.
I've
known you long enough, John. I know the trouble that I tend to get into. So, yep.
Yeah. All right. A couple of things, Will, you'll notice. Slide placement experiment over. Did not work. So we're back.
I like it that way.
Yeah, I like it that way too. So 15th episode, that's pretty awesome. I don't know if we're going to celebrate it or not in any way. You got any ideas?
For a 15th? I mean, 15 is not really like a big one,
It's a
right?
half
Like 20,
anniversary.
25, 50.
Yeah.
You know, depends on how long we
good.
go.
We'll get to
50's
20
good.
and see if we can come up with the best of.
I will say, though, that's not fair. It is special to have Bill here today,
Always
and
special.
you and Bill have a professional and a personal history. So I do want to celebrate Bill's presence. Thank you, Bill. Even
thank
though
you,
we're not
Will.
making a big deal out of 15, we should make a big deal out of him being here.
Thank you, Will. John will celebrate it by bantering with me. But I think
that is very true.
The more important part is I'm a completely new representative
That is
of
very
your
true.
entire exercise. So
That is
that's the
very
thing
true.
I'm proud of being here today, to represent a new
You are
box.
representing. And what are you representing, Bill?
I'm representing a new box. He's got
Correct.
Yep, you're in the expert box.
I am lower left.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, Bill, you mentioned earlier in the green room that you were pleased to be the first expert.
I am. Yep.
You're the first expert who hasn't had an episode air yet. So Erica is our first expert. I'm sorry to say that.
I don't know Erica. So yes,
Bill, I'm going to say to you, why no expert?
Why no? No, why no experts? I was beginning to worry you didn't know any.
That's true. Well, I think the ratio, and since I do most of the booking, probably puts at least a couple of good data points on that statement. So let's quit talking about how bad I am at this, and let's jump into the show.
I was enjoying that.
Yeah. All right. Wait, I got to do some producer work. Hang on. Now we're back. I click over the slides. Hey, everybody. I'm John Lane, and he is
Will Barfield,
and we are
a work in progress.
Work in progress. So here we are today, episode WIP-015. Will, did you notice that when I did the numbering, I started out with 3 digits so that if by chance we get to 999, we, I don't know, one of us won't be here when that happens.
Well, it's like
Right.
1999. We thought the world was going to end, but
That's
it
exactly
might
right.
not.
But
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty expert of me to get there. And
Thinking
speaking
ahead.
of experts, my my old friend, work colleague, and travel pal, Bill Sears. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Yes, very nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Since I forgot to brief Will on what you do and who you are, could you fill him in a little bit so he knows how to interview you, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're going to talk about the box I land in, but practically, I like to consider myself a translator. So I'm a trained marketer, went to school for marketing, actually did marketing at dozens of top brands in the US. At the end of the day, marketers are, in my opinion, get frustrated with technology, lots of data, not a lot of technology to help you use it. And so for me, I translate for technology companies, usually digital technology right now, because most people are online, especially with some of the recent happenings in the world.
Yeah.
And I translate what the product can do to what the business or marketer is out to accomplish. And I do that most often for salespeople like John, who simply like to go out and tell a good story. And the salespeople really just need that, for lack of a better word, that level of expert credibility to help them explain what the heck it is that the client's out to do and exactly how the technology is going to accomplish that. So translator, another big role for me in companies is air traffic controller. It's helping to make sure you have the right people involved in the right things.
Got it.
Nice. Very nice. Will, you might like this story. Bill, tell them what you revealed to tell our listener what you learned from or what you revealed to me about why you would always accompany me on sales calls with clients.
Basically, and I think anyone who's watched more than one episode here, and maybe I like the way you made that as singular, by the way, any person who's watched more than one episode will understand John will often talk about things he doesn't understand. And so at the end of the day, it was really to help make sure John didn't get the rest of the company in trouble. You know, we wanted to be able to deliver or act on what it was John was out talking about. John can also be distractible. I doubt, or yeah, like, and one of my very favorites to this day, if I ever need John's attention, I always ask, why no muffins?
Why no muffins?
Because at breakfast one day, he was just completely distracted by the idea that they had muffins on the menu, but for this specific day, they had no muffins to offer.
Well, that's
And
upsetting.
it was just an all stop in John's world. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, that's the background.
And we're gonna take us all out and edit, but just to defend myself just a little bit. It's not that I don't know anything about what I talk about. It's that I don't go very deep because I have people like you. I'm a primo, you're a secundi, and you can sweep up behind the elephant.
So maybe it's fair to say you don't care to know. Maybe that's more fair.
No, if you saw my OAD, you would know. No.
All right.
No. All right. Well, let's quit talking about me.
Goes against my.
Let's talk now. Will Barfield. I know you usually are pretty thoughtful and nice to our guests, but let's give that up for.
Okay.
Given the barrage of body blows that I just asked for. Okay, so this is the podcast where we talk about leadership traits under stress, and you might ask, or readers ask us all the time, or listeners, they send us emails and letters and stuff. No, they don't. And they want to know, how do you come up with those amazing superpowers of kryptonite? We use the OAD. Can I go up there?
You did. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. The OAD survey. It is, believe it or not, it is a brief, easy to administer and understand software. And it's a 5-minute assessment, and it tells you great things like we're going to cover today. And this is how an OAD assessment comes out. Bill, question we ask all of our guests: how does it feel to finally be displayed as a data table?
Finally, it was just a matter of time. This is how I think almost every day. So I appreciate having the actual piece of paper now. And for the record, I have shared this with my wife and daughter, and there were no surprises.
Great. Okay. So let's break this down. So if you see right above my head, that little red dot, that is the median line. Any of the traits to the right are dominant, any to the left are subordinate. The 4 traits we're going to look at today are assertiveness, extroversion, patience, and detail orientation. Bill is what we call an expert because of the relationship between his A and his D and his E and his D. Classic expert. He is very high on assertiveness. He will tell you what he's doing right and you're doing wrong without much hesitation. He's not particularly extroverted, more on the technical side. His patience is quite low relative to his other traits, which means he operates with a level of urgency like you haven't seen. And then he is high on detail orientation, which means, unlike me, he pays attention to all the details. And that is our friend. And you can imagine somebody like that we would call an expert. And that's because of their expertise that comes from their direct communication style with high knowledge. If Bill doesn't know something, he's going to go find out. And the way we used to work together is if we didn't know something, Bill would go find out, and then he would tell me. And that worked pretty well. So he was like my search engine. Bill, tell me how a DMP works. And then we'd be good. All right, that's enough of our chit chat. So we like to start the pod here, only 11 minutes in. Who's producing this thing? Will.
I'll send him a
We need a little more chop on this from the good folks at Slipshod Productions. So we talk a little bit about the generic superpowers, and then we'll get into Bill's own thoughts. So Will, why don't you lead us through that part of the conversation?
Love to. Thank you, John. Bill, I will not be hard on you. I'll just be me, and we'll see how this goes with a couple of Williams meeting for the first time. There's a theme of Williams, which is a great name. I happen to be a fan. I like yours. Generic, expert, technical specialist, someone who gets the readout similar to yours is going to see these same superpowers listed as the top ones. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this generic slide, but of these in this group, is there one here that speaks to you as terribly accurate that jumped out at you, or that you've heard others who are close to you say is really a significant component of the personality and style?
Oh yeah, it's the analytical skills one. Everything is an analysis. I've never met analysis I didn't like, and I've never met analysis I wasn't willing to do. So everything has to be overthought and overanalyzed. And that one really stood out to me on this list.
Got it. Kryptonite wise. So as you were instructed in the run up to preparation for this episode, we look at how our superpowers, when in situations of challenge or stress or pressure, can be inverted. Those things can become kryptonite weaknesses, the shadow side of the positive. Which of these here on this generic slide leaps out at you most?
Oh, it's the last one. Inward looking. It's the old. If you didn't want to know my opinion, you weren't listening, right? It's the idea that I'm going to know or find out, and overlooking some of the outside. Well, that's not normal, right? And I'm like, well, I don't even take normal into account. It's what I understand. So definitely the last one.
That must make you very popular everywhere you go.
And John knows that.
John knows that.
So you took some time, and thank you for that, to read your results and go over the table. Probably had conversations with your family about the results and accuracy. It's funny. First time I ever took the assessment, I didn't read it before sending it to my wife. I had her look at it first and tell me how accurate she thought it was.
Very brave of you. My wife would have a field day with that.
Yeah. Well, I knew it was accurate when I heard Amy in the background scream witchcraft.
Yeah, and talk about bravery, Bill. I own this company with my wife. It's a woman-owned business, and it's just the two of us. So we own a company together, and she owns me legally in every way possible. So yes, great bravery, also great fortune. The 4 things here, you chose to write them down. Walk me through, if you will, kind of what you made note of here as it relates to the superpowers that you uncovered through OAD, and I may ask a question or two.
Sure. For the record, I did send John about 4 pages of ideas, and he narrowed them down to just these. So I'll go with his lead. But for the record, there was a lot more detail behind here.
Well, and if you're unhappy with what he picked, feel free to ad lib.
These are just as good as any others. So the one I like to pick on here is learning or dead. I always feel like you have to be open to learning. You can always be taught something new, and that comes from listening and explaining, which sort of goes along with the idea of being driven, right? I manage my day to the minute, and it makes my wife nuts. Like, even on the weekends, I'll know I'm going to finish vacuuming at 2:00, and I'm going to start cleaning the car at 2:15, and coffee happens in between there, and I'll be done by 4. So we need to have a plan or where we're going after 4:00. And it just makes her crazy because she'd rather sit on the sofa and figure it out as it goes. But yeah, that's literally managing it to the minute. I'm always very proud when my day works out the way I planned it. Not saying that always happens, but on the straightforward, I mentioned earlier, if you didn't want to know my opinion, you shouldn't have been listening, right? Because I already told you. I think this also comes with this idea of an empathy chip. So when John returned this findings to me, he said he had confirmed my membership of the Robot Club, which I don't take as an offense. That's fine.
Even though it was clearly meant as one.
I know, which is the other reason not to take it as an offense, just to make John that little bit more anxious about it. But the idea of empathy, in my opinion, it's like it's a two-way street, and at the end of the day, this idea of being straightforward, I'd much rather know what people are thinking than have to try and guess. It's hard, and it probably goes back to the social situations that I probably don't read well. But at the end of the day, it's a lot easier if we all just say what we mean and mean what we say. And so for me, being very straightforward, I just don't understand another route about it. Like, I'm not out to offend anybody, and I'm here to understand what's going on and figure it out. And I think that leads to the last one. My very favorite superpower is this last, detail orientation. I love to be prepared. And I struggle with people who sort of just show up and throw up, as you say. And that happens a lot, in my line of business, working with salespeople, you can imagine. But having all that information to just remove blockers, my favorite meeting is when someone raises something and they're like dropping the mic, right? It's like, this is a big problem. And it's like, wait a minute. We've thought about that and we've come up with a solution, and this is how it would work. You sort of just remove all the air from the room at that point, and you're able to get where you want to go. So again, I look at these from a superpower standpoint. They all work together in order for me to be successful every day.
Well, and
yet there's kryptonite. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So, a great breakdown there. Appreciate that directness. I got your opinion because I was listening. I didn't get to ask any questions because John moved to this slide so quickly. So no need to go back. I think we'll get the real fun here.
There's just so much here, Will. I had to keep us moving.
Yeah.
So the kryptonite, you made some notes here. Why don't we talk about these, Bill?
Absolutely. So John and I have worked together for a number of years. One of my favorite memories is we had landed in Los Angeles, and we needed to drive north of Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, which is a fairly good distance in Los Angeles traffic. And what I tend to think comes out of my mouth, right? This idea of inwardly focused. There's very little filter there. And so John would often remind me that I'm speaking my internal monologue. When I was complaining about other drivers or about the crappy rental car we got, John would basically tell me no one cares. And that's definitely a kryptonite moment for me. I feel like all the details are important and everyone's interested in all the details. And it's a bit of a downer for me when people like John remind me that they really just don't care, that, it needs to be a bigger picture.
We're listening to our own inner monologues. You're interrupting ours by saying yours out loud.
And it goes, I think this happens to me almost every, I had to explain myself this week, in fact, this brusque idea. I argue to understand. And a lot of people who are not in my head or are not used to working with me, all of a sudden they think I'm mad, or I disagree with them or I hate them or think their idea is dumb. And none of those things are true. The honest fact is I'm arguing to understand. And one of my very favorite clients, in fact, I'd turn in every month. I'd do a brand health report for him, and he would argue with me over my conclusions. And I asked him one day, finally, it was like 3 years. I said, Steve, why are you busting my chops on this every month? And he said, I want to make sure you did the homework, you did the legwork to defend what you concluded. Right. And that's like, oh my gosh, like I totally get it. I need to explain that, I think, to more people myself. That argue to understand point isn't the fact that I'm trying to change your mind, or I'm trying to say your idea is dumb. I'm trying to understand how you got there. And this last one's fun, delegation, right? It totally takes me a while to warm up. It's sort of like prove it to me. And I always argue I am BS. I have a BS. You have to pass the BS test. So at the end of the day, there are some things you just figure out work and don't work. And once you're in the fold and you've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, great, I can trust that person with this. It's been proven to me, everything's going along fine. I'm going to be able to ask the questions and get the results. Like, you're in the fold, like done. John is now forever doomed to being there as we were successful in what we actually called the Bill and John show, or John and Bill show, depending on billing. But there are other things, like I'll never let John drive. Back to the rental car story, like, no, there's no place on earth that I'm going to rent a car and let John drive. Nope. Not gonna
I think that's as much a reflection on you than it is on me. Will, dig into this guy. Would you defend me?
No, you were talking about the argue to understand piece, and that's a great point. And when you're interacting, Bill, either up to leadership or to client, or across to peers, or down to direct reports, and it's a challenging situation, do you find that kryptonite part of your personality, which can upset apple carts very easily, do you find more problems going up, across, or down? Or where have you found that it can be the greatest Achilles heels for you as a leader?
I love the question, and you've inserted a filter that I actually don't have, which is organizational awareness. I think it's interesting, and I believe in treating people the same, right? So whether I'm going up or down or sideways, the way I approach it typically doesn't change. Now, that said, it changes a little bit with clients. John will attest. There's a longer patience cycle, and mind you, remember how low my patience was on the scale. There's a slightly longer patience cycle with clients, but I'll give you an example. I worked for a company at the time that was purchased by an individual. So an individual came in, wrote a personal check, bought the company. It was a fairly big company. And after 3 months, he would actively search me out as part of the senior leadership team, because he knew I would tell him the truth. And others were trying to figure out how to navigate his very direct form of leadership. And so he'd literally walk into a room and he would ask, where's Bill? Like, we need to get Bill in here because he's going to tell me the truth. That's the thing I always strive for. And so to your filter, it's interesting to think that way, because I don't, and to be honest with you, from a kryptonite standpoint, it's probably limiting. I'm not, and it's very well known, I'm not a good political navigator.
Yeah.
Well, that was what I was getting at, was that reading the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Bill's Bill, message is delivered, and this is the facts, so everyone should understand why I got here. And the lack of room reading at times, it can certainly impact the feelings of those who are downline from you, and how you manage them, the peers that you're interacting with, and how they receive you. But like you said, with this one person who was the owner of the company, figured out, like, if I want the truth and I bring him in here, he's not going to apologize or fluff or, tell me a story. He's just going to tell me the deal. So it can be a strength and it can be a weakness. It just really depends on who you're interacting with and what you need from them. Yeah,
totally. It's the audience. I completely agree with you. And then the other thing is there's a rapport piece you've got to build up, so there's definitely a filter. And I joke, when you look at, John had me also rate my position, and that where I see these traits required in my position, patience is a little bit higher for my role, and so that's an area I really personally have to pay attention to a lot, because I am impatient. I'm the person that's on your bumper. I'm not understanding why you're not going faster or getting out of my way. And it's just, I have to be very careful, in early stages of establishing that rapport, to be more patient, to listen a little bit longer.
Yeah, I know John wanted to be defended. I'm going to make a point here, John, then we're going to segue. So, one of the things that, I'm in sales and business development for a career, as is John. And John and I, when we're preparing for a meeting with a client, when we're going to get on one of these calls like we are after this, he will often text me in advance and say, hey, is this person going to be there? What's their style? He wants to get a read of the room before he gets in there, so he kind of knows who will be there and how to interact. From a prep standpoint, he and I are about the same, which is if we're one slide ahead of the rest of the crowd, we feel like we're experts. That's all we need, as opposed to miles and miles of prep. So we're, I think, probably by nature more room readers, and the reaction of those people has so much to do with whether or not we close the deal. And we can wing it on the prep. So you mentioned that you shared this with family, and there are things that you probably reflected on in this that have professional, personal implications as you think about work, home, social. What are some of the things that you discovered here in this brief study that you can utilize to your benefit going forward to help you with the way you manage Bill and those that interact most closely with him on a daily basis?
Yeah, the two things I took away, and they sort of cross the gamut here to help me everywhere, is patience and detail oriented. A, I need to have a little bit more patience, and B, to the earlier point, not everyone cares, right, about a lot of those details. It's true, and it's a painful piece for me because I'm out to always understand, and so across the board, it's interesting. I try and put myself in situations, and social, I'll pick on social is probably the most awkward one for me. I don't watch any sports that don't involve, F1, right? So it's not F1, I don't watch it. We just came out of serious sportings, and what sales meeting or what social interaction doesn't start or end or include some sporting thing, right? And think about it, like I want to know all the details. I don't know anybody's batting average. I don't even know what a batting average is or how it's calculated. And so it's a really awkward piece for me, and I'm trying to get people to a spot where there's something I can actually contribute to the conversation. It's weird. So I went out and I joined my local beer club. So it's my neighbors all get together on Wednesday, and we alternate houses, or I live in a cold place. Sometimes it's a garage, and we drink and talk, right? And it's taught me how to navigate sports conversations without knowing sports.
I love that, Bill.
Interesting. Put yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
100%. Yeah, it's impossible to go to one of those beer club meetings and not hear about some sport.
Love it. Bill, who's next?
Oh boy, I get to nominate someone. I'm very excited about this, actually. So I thought about two things. One, someone you and I both know and have worked with. And two, someone who I'm curious to know where she fits. So Carolyn Burnbach is my nomination. I think it would be hilarious for a number of reasons. She's had a very interesting work and personal journey, and I think it would be a lot of fun to see where Carolyn lands in this box of quadrants. Also, someone that I partnered with on the sales front and worked very successfully with. So I'm curious even how close she comes to your profile, John, to see
you will see. We need more. This world needs more builders. Awesome.
I don't think so. Look at your boxes, John. You've got a whole bunch of them.
I know. That was a joke, Bill. Read the room.
All right. Yeah, I don't.
Thanks for showing up, brother. Great to see you. I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are A Work in Progress. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.